In the previous part, we saw how Stanley Ipkiss found an external outlet for his suppressed rage through a magical mask. His story ended in healing because his shadow finally got a voice through laughter and action. But what happens when there is no such release valve? When nice guy syndrome becomes a total internal prison, and the fear of imperfection blocks every attempt to assert your own limits. Nina Sayers' story in Black Swan is a disturbing illustration of what happens when unexpressed emotions begin to dismantle a person from the inside. Where Stanley suffered from external disorder, Nina lives in a state of profound psychosis, the product of years of suppressing her true nature in pursuit of an unattainable ideal. Her life is the triumph of persona over personhood. She is the white swan, innocent and immaculate, a creature whose boundaries have been completely erased by her mother's ambitions and the brutal demands of the ballet world. In this part, we look at how the body becomes the last line of defense. When we refuse to protect ourselves with words, our physiology takes over the job. We will see how the lump in Nina's throat, the compulsive itch between her shoulder blades, and her self-harm become her body's cry for help. This is a story about the fact that suppressed energy does not disappear. It simply turns inward, and the cost of that kind of perfection can be catastrophic for both the psyche and the life. Nina Sayers is the good girl archetype pushed to its tragic extreme, a personality almost entirely consumed by its own social role. Where the mask gave us the comedy of compulsive agreeableness, Black Swan confronts us with a full psychotic break grown on the soil of total perfectionism. Nina's entire existence is a performance of the white swan, the symbol of innocence, fragility, and absolute obedience, behind which there is no autonomous will at all. In Jungian terms, her persona, her social facade, has become so dense that her authentic self has been buried completely beneath the weight of other people's expectations. The central tragedy of Nina's situation is that her boundaries were erased in childhood through a codependent relationship with her mother. Erica Sayers, whose own career never materialized, effectively turned her daughter into an instrument for the realization of her own unfulfilled ambitions. Psychologists describe this pattern as arrested development. Nina remains emotionally immature, a perpetual child, whose inner world is bounded by the walls of a childhood bedroom with pink wallpaper and stuffed animals. Her mother controls every aspect of her existence, her diet, her physical space, her sleep, denying Nina the conditions she would need to form an independent identity and recognize her own desires. This total control and the terror of failing to meet the ideal cut Nina off from her shadow, the vital, passionate, aggressive part of the self that in the film is embodied by Lily. Lily represents everything Nina suppresses in herself: uninhibited sexuality, spontaneity, the willingness to break rules. Because Nina is pathologically unable to draw boundaries through language and consciously defend her own interests, her psyche begins to fracture under the pressure of maintaining the facade of perfection. The protests that cannot be spoken and the energy that cannot be released transform into self-destruction, turning her path to artistic triumph into an act of psychological self-annihilation. When a person's voice is silenced by fear, their biology speaks instead. In Nina's case, the body becomes the last line of defense. Her perfectionism and obsessive-compulsive patterns transform into physical self-destruction. Rather than asserting her limits outward, she turns the aggression inward, manifesting as compulsive self-harm, pulling out her hair, scratching her back until it bleeds. These wounds are not merely injuries. They are the physical trace of her dark side struggling to be born, the black swan's feathers breaking through skin in a way that cannot be contained. The visual metaphor for her condition during this period is the music box with the dancing ballerina. The box is a perfect reflection of Nina herself, fragile, locked into the same flawless repetitive motion, entirely subject to an external mechanism. When the box breaks, It is a premonition of her inevitable psychological collapse. Nina's psyche, like the mechanism inside the toy, cannot withstand the pressure of the ideal it is straining toward. Her body signals catastrophe through hallucinations and distorted joints. The scenes in which she appears to see her legs deforming are a visualization of her biological nature being sacrificed to the role. She is literally offering herself up to the art, overriding every pain signal her body sends. This is the clearest possible picture of what perfectionism actually costs. In chasing the ideal, she moves further and further from health, turning her body into a battlefield. If Nina's body is the battlefield, her mother Erica is the architect of the prison. Their relationship is a textbook case of projective identification. Erica, the failed ballerina, does not see her daughter as a separate person. She sees her as a second chance. Nina's success is Erica's compensation for her own failure, and any stumble by the daughter is experienced as a personal affront. Within this system, Nina has no right to a self. She dances solely to fill the void inside her mother. Erica is a skilled practitioner of infantilization and passive aggression as tools of control. She deliberately keeps Nina in a childlike state, clipping her nails, helping her dress, surrounding her with soft toys and pink. This strips Nina of adult sexuality and of any possibility of genuine separation. Every time Nina attempts to assert her will, as in the scene with the birthday cake, the attempt is immediately crushed through guilt. Erica is warm and caring only as long as Nina remains the compliant white swan. The moment any passion or aggression surfaces in her daughter, she becomes icily distant. The breaking point arrives when the shadow's suppressed energy finally begins to burst through the dam of control. Nina's process of separation does not happen through honest dialogue. It happens through violence, mirroring the severity of her suppression. She begins refusing her mother, eventually causing her physical harm, and performs a symbolic act of liberation, throwing every toy out of her room. This brutal dismantling of the childhood facade is the only way she can access the adult aggression of the Black Swan. But the tragedy is that Nina could only kill the influence of her mother Warden by destroying herself in the process. The price of that freedom turned out to be incompatible with life. If Erica Sayers is the external force holding Nina inside the white swan, Lily is the most powerful internal catalyst for her transformation. In Jungian psychology, Lily functions as the classic shadow. She carries every quality Nina has been systematically suppressing: spontaneity, sensuality, the freedom to break rules. But because the prohibition on these qualities has been so total, Nina's shadow does not simply coexist with her. It begins to detach, generating a frightening dissociation. The clearest expression of this disintegration is the mirror scenes. At moments of peak tension, Nina sees in her reflection not herself, but an autonomous entity in her own form, living its own life. In one of the film's key scenes, her double in the mirror continues scratching her back while Nina herself has already frozen and is watching with horror. This is dissociation made visible. She is the one performing the action, but her conscious mind refuses to claim it, attributing it to someone else. The shadow has literally separated from its owner, becoming an uncontrollable doppelganger that does what good Nina has under the strictest prohibition. Her relationship with Lily only accelerates this fragmentation of identity. The hallucinations in which Lily takes on Nina's appearance show that the character has lost her grip on reality entirely. The conflict between Nina's clean identity and her liberated shadow reaches its climax in the imagined confrontation in which she must destroy her rival, a moment that symbolizes the final shattering of her old, constrained facade. Through Lily and the mirror doubles, we see the tragic truth. When the shadow is held in the basement of the psyche for years, its emergence does not come through healthy integration. It comes through psychotic rupture, turning the encounter with oneself into a life-or-death struggle. The central lesson of Nina Sayers' story is that ignoring the body's signals leads to catastrophe. When we cannot, or are afraid to, articulate our limits through language, the body takes on that function itself, converting psychological pressure into physical pain. To prevent the kind of catastrophic self-destruction we see in the film, we need to learn to recognize the early warning signals of boundary violation at the physiological level before they escalate into serious psychosomatic disorders. Your body is the most honest indicator available to you because biological responses are far harder to override or rationalize away than thoughts. Some of the primary signals to watch for: a tightness in the throat or tension in the jaw. This almost always points to unexpressed anger or suppressed protest. The body is preparing to speak and being stopped. Heaviness in the shoulders and upper back. In Nina's case, this escalated into compulsive skin scratching, but at earlier stages, it registers as a physical sense of weight. The accumulated load of responsibility and other people's expectations pressing down. Disrupted breathing or a knot in the stomach. This is the autonomic nervous system's response to an intrusion into your personal space or a violation of your sense of wholeness. The gut knows before the mind catches up. Learning to read these signals is the first step toward protecting your psyche. The concept of somatic resonance describes the phenomenon in which the body responds to toxic environments faster than conscious awareness can process what is happening. If interactions with a particular person or situation consistently leave you drained, physically uncomfortable, or tense, that is direct evidence that your limits are being encroached upon. The task is to intercept that impulse and convert it from a physical contraction into a conscious, deliberate response. Nina Sayers' story is a tragic myth of individuation in which the price of artistic triumph turned out to be incompatible with the survival of a coherent self. She achieved perfection only by completely destroying her childhood persona and allowing the shadow to consume consciousness. The film's ending leaves us with a bitter understanding. The road to an ideal that runs through the total annihilation of your own self leads to psychological death. Nina's body signaled catastrophe through hallucinations and physical pain, but she chose to sacrifice her biological nature to the role. What this example teaches us is that it is not enough to simply hear your own pain. You need to be able to transform it into a clear, conscious statement of where you stand. We need more than just the black swan's claws for moments of radical self-defense. We need a language of freedom, a way of engaging with the world without coming apart at the seams. To avoid reaching the point where a psychotic break seems like the only exit, we need to practice something softer. In the next part, we move from these frightening transformations toward practical tools. Using the perks of being a wallflower as our text, we will look at specific language and psychological techniques for setting limits in relationships and situations, with confidence and without destroying yourself in the process. If this breakdown helped you understand your own body's signals a little better, leave a like and subscribe. And share in the comments. Have you ever experienced your body speaking for you when you yourself stayed silent?